February 3, 1942, southern approaches to Benghazi. The morning began in a silence that felt unnatural, as if the desert itself feared waking what slept beneath its surface. The light was weak, stretched thin over dunes hardened by the night's bitter cold. The sand did not drift yet, it only held patterns of wind, frozen in place. Thin smoke from a distant cook fire clung low to the ground, refusing to rise. In that fragile quiet, German tank crews prepared for another push westward. Their engines remained dormant, their hatches still open to the chill, and their breath lingered in pale clouds above steel that had not yet warmed. The desert, to them, had always been a promise of speed. Open terrain. Long lines of sight. The perfect arena for armored maneuvers. And on this morning, before the first sound touched the stillness, many believed they already understood the shape of the day. They expected movement, thrust, and counter-thrust. They expected British tanks, perhaps dispersed infantry, maybe a fighter patrol overhead. But they did not yet expect the sound that had already begun its slow approach. Miles away, hidden from sight, it began as a faint pulse, barely perceptible, like a heartbeat muffled under sand. A rhythmic thump that drifted through the air before the sun rose high enough to cast real shadows. It was the sound that had come to define the British presence in North Africa. The symbolic signature of the 25-pounder. And as the pulse grew, as it deepened into a steady, measured concussion, the German tank crews stiffened. Many had heard it before. All had learned what followed. To understand why that sound inspired dread, one must return to the beginning, before Rommel's name became synonymous with the Desert War, before the Afrika Korps understood the true character of the British defense. Berlin had sent its armored forces south believing the desert would be a canvas for daring operations. Reports from Italian units had spoken of wide-open ground. Rommel had been that commander. He had faith in rapid thrusts, in sudden flank attacks, in the element of surprise. And at first, those qualities worked. But as the campaign developed, he encountered something that neither speed nor audacity could reliably overcome: British artillery doctrine, refined through years of preparation, supported by an industrial system that could feed its guns without pause. The 25-pounder itself, medium in caliber, simple in design, did not seem like the type of weapon to dominate a battlefield. Yet the desert amplified its strengths. Visibility stretched for miles. There were no forests to shield movement, no hills to mask advance. Every tank silhouette stood out against the horizon like a target illuminated on a firing range. Observation posts could mark ranges with uncanny accuracy, and British commanders learned to move fire across the battlefield with a fluidity that German crews initially mistook for sorcery. German tank crews expected duels of armor. What they received instead was mathematics. A system in which calculation, coordination, and calm precision transformed the 25-pounder into something far greater than the sum of its parts. German diaries noted their surprise at how quickly British gunners reacted. A single observed movement could command a barrage within seconds. A dust cloud from maneuvering armor was enough to draw a curtain of shells. And the barrage was never sporadic. Never hesitant. It came in waves measured like the ticking of a metronome, each shot a reaffirmation of Allied structure and abundance. The sound, the symbolic thump that traveled farther than the shells themselves, became a warning that all illusions of safety were about to collapse. Rommel, ever the analyst, took careful note. In private writings recovered after the war, he spoke with rare vulnerability. He admitted that British artillery altered the nature of desert warfare itself. He observed that the 25-pounder possessed a form of psychological force. It robbed his tank crews of initiative. It punished momentum. It reduced bold maneuvers into calculated risks weighted heavily against survival. He described the British artillery line as the fixed skeleton of their defense, an immovable spine around which all other elements hinged. When his spearheads met that spine, they did not break it. They dissolved against it. What German tank crews expected when entering North Africa was superiority. Their tanks were reliable, their doctrine proven, their morale high. Yet what they experienced was something far different. Ammunition shortages plagued them. Fuel arrived only intermittently. Resupply convoys moved slowly, exposed to British aircraft. Even their radio networks, vital for rapid maneuver, suffered interference and range limitations. In contrast, British gun crews seemed never to slow, never to ration, never to hesitate. Ammunition crates stacked high beside firing pits symbolized more than firepower, they symbolized the industrial breadth of an empire. Each shell sent into the desert sky was a reminder that Britain, despite losses, despite distance, could still summon vast reserves of material and manpower. The symbolic object of this campaign, the one that defined British endurance, was not the tank, nor the aircraft, nor even the soldier. It was the shell itself. A simple cylinder of metal and explosive, mass-produced by factories far from the desert, carried across oceans, unloaded at ports under threat, and delivered through miles of vulnerable supply lines. To German crews, that shell represented British resolve. Its abundance meant that the British would not yield ground easily. Its consistency meant that the British could fight with mathematical reliability even when outmaneuvered. Rommel admitted that the British had achieved a harmony between equipment and doctrine that Germany had not anticipated. He wrote of moments when entire armored advances were halted by artillery alone, no tanks opposing them, no infantry blocking the path, only the relentless rain of shells. In one report from the 21st Panzer Division, officers described a morning advance that disintegrated when the first barrage fell. Vehicles scattered. Formations collapsed. Dust clouds mingled with smoke until navigation became impossible. The advance ended not with a clash of steel but with immobilization, forced by explosive precision. The transformation in German perception grew slowly but became undeniable. The desert ceased to be a playground for armored ingenuity. It became a chessboard in which the British guns dictated the first and last moves. The tank, once the undisputed king of maneuver warfare, found itself humbled by a weapon that could strike without exposing itself. By mid-1942, experienced German crews approached open ground with a caution bordering on superstition. They avoided ridge crests. They shunned predictable routes. They maneuvered not according to bold doctrine but according to fear of unseen observers marking their range. When the distant thump began, often minutes before shells landed, tank commanders felt their stomachs tighten. They knew that sound meant exposure, and exposure meant loss. British crews, for their part, bore the burden of their weapon. Constant firing left shoulders raw, hearing damaged, hands blistered and blackened with cordite. Yet they continued with the quiet resilience characteristic of those fighting for more than territory. To many, the gun was more than metal. It was an instrument of democratic endurance. It represented a nation refusing to yield under threat. Each shell fired was a reminder that they were not fighting alone, that behind them stood factories, workers, families, a chain of effort stretching across continents. The 25-pounder's voice became the voice of the Allied will, as the desert campaign evolved toward its ultimate turning points, Knightsbridge, El Alamein, the long and bitter contest for supply corridors. The gun remained a constant. Tanks were lost. Positions exchanged. Units reorganized. But the artillery line, with its implacable rhythm, served as the hinge upon which every battle turned. Even after the war, survivors spoke of that sound with a reverence shaped by fear. German veterans recalled the hollow echo inside tank hulls as shells struck nearby. British veterans remembered the shimmering horizon as their guns fired at maximum range. And Rommel's own admissions, written not for propaganda but for clarity, confirmed what thousands of men had already felt. The British 25-pounder had reshaped the Desert War, placing discipline and coordination above speed and daring. In the end, as the Afrika Korps retreated toward Tunisia, the symbolic thump grew fainter. Not because the guns weakened, but because distance widened and the campaign approached its conclusion. Yet the meaning of that sound remained engraved in memory. It represented more than firepower. It represented the idea that an organized, determined force, rooted in shared purpose and industrial strength, could stand firm even in the harshest environment, and in the vast expanse of the North African desert, where light dissolved shadows and heat blurred the horizon. That sound became a reminder that freedom often depends not on spectacle but on steady, unwavering resolve. The desert remembers many things: tracks erased by wind, bones buried by sand, wreckage swallowed by time. But the echo of the 25-pounder endures, a fading heartbeat of a distant war, carrying with it the truth that determination, not ambition, shapes the fate of nations.